Okay, yeah, sorry, DDoS, yeah, it still happens. So you do upset the wrong people, and there's defences against it, but you have to be a big company really. They can, instead of sending you like one request, per user, they can send you millions, which obviously affects your server. Your server will stop being able to perform because it's constantly getting requests for information. Yeah. Now, the advantage of using somebody like Google is that automatically you're using Google's back end. So when you're creating your website on Google, you're actually protecting yourself against DDoS, because very few companies out there have back end's not a rude word, by the way. Back end means all their infrastructure, all their technology, all the speed of their broadband, and their broadband is so immense compared to most companies that you really are well protected. So that's worth knowing about. The other thing is, occasionally people don't like you, so they find how to hack onto your website. Like you might remotely hack into your website or log into your website, and because they can figure out your password. So if you got insecure passwords, if you're using I don't know, the name of your family pet or the name of your firstborn child, stuff like that for your passwords, they can track that information. They might find you on Facebook, they might get information about you, they might start using that as the basis of passwords, and believe it or not, they can get onto your website that way. So you've got to be careful. And they can, they can deface your websites. It's not unheard of, like political parties to get stuff put on there which is designed to be offensive and all the rest of it. Religious comments, political, childish comments. Unfortunately, it can happen. It can happen. Unfortunately, fortunately, not a lot. But it all depends on how secure you keep your passwords, what you do online. Don't ever sort of talk about things which you shouldn't talk about. It can be used to find things about you, and therefore, and also, if nothing else, people can spoof your website, actually take a copy of your website, set it up somewhere else, maybe on a similar domain, and then start trying to poach your customers or your,
They do it on Facebook and that, and Instagram, don't they?
Yes, it does happen, unfortunately. So you got to be careful of sort of malicious attack. Again, I'm conscious you guys are probably never going to have this happen to you, quite frankly. But, if you're the next eBay or the next Google or the next, it will happen to you. This happens to Google, this happens to all the big companies every day. There's always someone trying to hack in on these big sites. So they have a back end to sort of work out a way of protecting you without sort of slowing things down and all the rest of it. So, there can be, people will try tricks like, Hotmail is a well-known email. Well, they might do Hotmail. They might do, Hot5 mail or something, just to make it look like it's original, but you have to be, very, very careful. So a little video for you. Now, unfortunately, the sound doesn't come through, so I'll have to cut this video out. So I've also put the video on Google Classroom. So when I send you the recording, it won't have the video in, I'm afraid.
Hi, my name is Jenny Martin, and I'm the Director of Cybersecurity Investigations at Symantec. Today, cybercrime causes huge problems for society, personally, financially, and even in matters of national security. Just in the last few years, hundreds of millions of credit card numbers have been stolen. Tens of millions of social security numbers and healthcare records were compromised. Even nuclear centrifuges have been hacked, and unmanned aerial drones have been hijacked. This is all done by exploiting vulnerabilities in hardware and software, or more often by taking advantage of unintentional decisions made by the people using the software. The people committing these cybercrimes don't fit a single profile or motivation. It could be anyone from an international terrorist to a teenager competing for bragging rights. Today, the largest countries not only have a regular army, but also have a well-armed cyber army. In fact, the next world war may not be fought with traditional weapons, but with computers used to shut down national water supplies, energy grids, and transportation systems.
Hi, my name is Parisa, and I'm Google's Security Princess. I've worked on a lot of different Google products in a lot of different ways to try and make our software as secure as possible.
Now let's take a look at how cybercrime works under the hood.
We'll learn about software viruses, denial of service attacks, and phishing scams. In biology and life, a virus is an organism that is spread by coughing, sneezing, or physical contact. Viruses work by infecting cells, injecting their genetic material, and using those cells to replicate. They can make people really sick and then spread to other people. A computer virus works a bit similarly. A virus is an executable program that gets installed, usually unintentionally, and harms a user and their computer. It's also possible for a virus to spread itself to other computers. Now, how does a virus get on your computer in the first place? There are a couple ways an attacker can infect someone's computer. They might lure a victim into installing a program with deception about the program's purpose. So, for example, a lot of viruses are disguised as security updates. It's also possible that the software on your computer has a vulnerability, so an attacker can install itself without even needing explicit permission. Once a virus is on your computer, it can steal or delete any of your files, control other programs, or even allow someone else to remotely control your computer. Using computer viruses, hackers can take over millions of computers worldwide, and then use them as a digital army, otherwise known as a botnet, to attack and take down websites. This kind of attack is called a distributed denial of service. A denial of service is when hackers overwhelm a website with too many requests. We call it a distributed denial of service when the attack comes from many computers all at once. Most websites are ready to respond to millions of requests a day, but if you hit them with billions or trillions of requests coming from different places, the computers are overloaded and stop responding.
Another trick used by cybercriminals is to send large amounts of spam email in an attempt to trick people into sharing sensitive personal information. This is called a phishing scam. A phishing scam is when you get what seems like a trustworthy email asking you to log into your account, but clicking the email takes you to a fake website. If you log in anyway, you've been tricked into giving your password away. Hackers can then use your login credentials to access your real accounts, to steal information, or maybe even to steal your money. Fortunately, there are many companies, laws, and government organizations working to make the internet safer, but these efforts are not enough. You may think when a computer system gets hacked, the problem was the security design or the software. 90% of the time a system gets hacked, however, it's not because of a security bug, but because of a simple mistake made by a human.
It turns out there are steps we can all take to protect ourselves. Often, your actions not only impact the security of your own data and computer, but the security of everyone at your school, workplace, and home. With billions or trillions of dollars at stake, cybercriminals get smarter each year, and we all need to keep up.
I want princess in my job title.
I know, I'm not sure that's a bit sexist myself, I'm not sure that's a bit, anyway, that's a different one. But yeah, there you go. So, some legislation you also need to be aware of. Now, it's not a major problem. Companies, for example, you'd have to be registered, you're a bona fide company, you'd have to be registered for certain things like the DPA. That just so that they are aware who you are, so that if somebody comes to them and says this person's got information about us, they would have corresponding registration of that company, so they know, yeah, that's a genuine company, and therefore, you know, that person can get information from that company, and vice versa. If you know, if they do have an account, well, anyway, that's something you can sort out. The other things you might need to do a little crash course on, depending on what your business is. So, for example, the Copyright Design and Patents Act stops people from copying things. Now, this is where, if you've got an image, like a piece of artwork, and you put it on the internet, this is probably the law which they would use to stop someone or stop somebody from, you know, benefiting from your, you know. So, and there's also the other act, the Disability Discrimination Act, because unless you're aware and do at least what you can be, you know, you can break these laws. Now, to be fair, this is one of those ones where big companies they have a lot of issues with this, and all they do at the end of the day is they try and think about what any possible things they can do to alleviate any situation. But if you literally have a blind person come to your website and they can't see, then they can't see. It's not your you know. But if you have somebody who has certain sort of like colour, you know, problems, you know, your website may have a version which might be a high contrast version, make it easier, which removes a lot of the clutter. So you could do stuff like that. But at your sort of stage, you wouldn't be expected really to do that. You wouldn't go to the High Court and have to justify yourself, because they'd say, you know, how are your profits? You know, how much are the cost to do? Says, what profits is the charity and not, you know? So there's a limit basically. But it's worth thinking about. And if you're aware of these sort of bits of legislation, the latest one, of course, the one which changed everything, was the General Data Protection Regulation. Now, there are videos on that. I think I can put in. I haven't already put on Google Classroom. They changed very quickly the way most companies looked at data privacy. So when we just had what was called the DPA, if you basically end up, you know, at the very extreme, getting taken to court by a company, or probably by the government, you might get a fine. The fine might be, you know, it might seem a lot to you, but for companies it might be a couple of £1,000. But to the big companies, that's nothing. It's actually cheaper to actually just carry on doing the way you do. Telly West were notorious for this. Telly West, in the end, they had a memo which was from senior management to the IT team saying basically, how much is it going to cost to fix all these security problems? And the reply was, well, it's going to cost you maybe £500,000 to fix them, but if we keep getting fined £10,000-20,000 at a time, it's cheaper to just pay the fines.
Yeah.
That's our conclusion.
Yeah.
Let's just keep paying the fines. Let's not fix the problem, because it's going to cost you £500,000 to fix, but you can be fined 300 times or whatever before you've got to pay the same amount. Let's keep paying the fines. And of course, as soon as the General Data Protection Regulation came into force, completely different.
Yeah.
It is, I can't remember the exact amount, it's 12% of your income. Doesn't matter if you make a profit or a loss. Amazon technically doesn't make a profit even to this day, but it's 12% of your income. Amazon's income is in the trillions. So it's 12% of 12, you know, of £1 trillion or whatever their income is, you know.
Paul, can I just say the British Library in London offering courses, free courses and all
Yes,
this?
they do, don't they? Yes.
Yeah.
There's actually quite a lot of, especially General Data Protection Regulations, quite a lot of free online advice. There's in each country is what's called the Data Protection Registrar, who is the government sort of czar, if you like, for data protection, and they have on their site loads of free information. But again, it's only if you're a commercial entity do you need to really worry about this. Charities do worry about us because they're really in reality a business like anything else. But colleges do this sort of stuff as well because again they're a business. But you know, it's something you need to be aware of. So at least because that's what the law says, you have to do the bare minimum, but you have to be aware of it. You know. There's not a lot for creating a website. There's not a lot to do. I don't want to get all stressed about it and say I'm not creating a website now. But if you are successful, and I'll be the first to knock on your door and say, "Can I have a job?" You remember me? I was the one who taught you how to create websites. You know, and yeah, if you ever get successful, then that's when you start thinking about these sort of things. Okay, that's when things get a little bit more complicated. So, what's personal data? Well, anything personal is basically belongs to somebody. You know. Information about where they live, their phone numbers, everything's personal. You have to encrypt, you have to do the basics, which is encrypt any personal information. And in that regard, I wouldn't take personal information if you can avoid it. I would keep everything, and you know, pretty well anonymous, and only keep the information for as long as you need. Because years ago, what companies used to do, they used to sell you something, and 25 years later, they still got your name and address. But 25 years later, you don't have a relationship with that company, other than you keep sending them emails, letters and stuff. And that is now illegal, because every year, every company who has information about you have to prove that you still have a relationship. So if you buy something once a year, that's fine for them. That's why some companies make, you know, special offers to customers just to keep their information. It's more important for them to keep that information and keep their customer base active, because otherwise they've got to start removing you off their databases and they can't contact you anymore, because otherwise they're going to get big fines.
The wording that you add on your website, is it standard, or I mean, presumably you will need to tweak it based on your business
pretty
needs, right?
standard. Yeah.
It's standard.
You can get very, you know, you can get, if you go to any of the big companies, you can copy the, you know, change it from Amazon to your, you know, it's all pretty standard, yeah.
doesn't matter.
I wouldn't worry too much about wording because there's a big argument in law that says it doesn't matter. Like you get emails with like the big legalese at the bottom, and most lawyers say it doesn't matter what you say there. You know, you can't enforce a contract if it's just in an email like that. It has to be in writing, has to be posted. There's all sorts of stuff, you know, there's all sorts of stuff. So anyway, and sensitive information is obviously information which. So if you knew somebody was, for example, I don't know, wanting to change the job, if you're in recruitment and you had information about people who are looking for a new job, it'd be very sensitive because if their old employer found out, that could like, you know, be huge. For, you know, their old employer could be like, oh, wait a minute, Fred's leaving us. Oh, in that case, we're not going to give him that promotion after all. You know, or we're not going to give him a pay rise. We're just about to give him a 10% pay rise. We're not going to do anything. And you know, so it's stuff like that. Think about.
That's why I get over the years I've had like agencies saying, do you still want to be
Yes.
our books and that? That's
They have to
a new
now.
thing where they
Yes.
have to
Yes,
grab your
especially in
data.
the last 5 or 6 years at least.
Yeah.
Before that, you may have answered the query. You may have to show how vague it was. You may have done something on Facebook, and then Facebook will give the company all your details: your name, your address, your phone number. That was the old Cambridge Analytica. That's where Cambridge Analytica, you know, and it created a huge, you know, basically. You know, let's example, you do a survey online and you don't realise, but because you create that survey, you've done the survey, you're now in a relationship with a company. So therefore, they can get from Facebook all your personal information, and they can start sending you all sorts of stuff. Or even worse, selling. That's what used to happen. They'd get your details, and they're not interested in your details. They're interested in your details to sell on.
Yeah.
And they would do like online Facebook surveys just to get loads of names and addresses and phone numbers and all that, and then they would sell them on as blocks. You become a commodity then. That was the whole point of these online things on
You get
Facebook.
bombarded with them then, don't you, once you
You
fill in
do,
a few of these?
because then other people then get them who buy them off them, and then they sell them to other people, and before you know it, your details have been sold thousands of times, because everyone's buying and selling these. It's like you know, a drug, and it's been cut to thinner and thinner, you know, and it's
Yeah.
been, you know, obviously you lot know more about that than me. Anyway, right.
We're not the 16-year-olds.
So yeah, you know, but you can get a lot of information, as you say, from what's called the Information Commissioner's Office. There's a in every country, and particularly in this country, we call them this. This is the name we call them. This guy, and he used to be called Forte, which was great because my surname's Deville Forte. If you're like, oh, you know, no relation. But anyway, this guy basically has a whole team of people. But basically, you can actually email them and say, look, this is the situation, I'm creating this website, what do I need to do? And they'll reply and they'll tell you straightforward advice. They got all sorts of training on their site and stuff like this. And they'll help you out. And if you think, well, am I doing it right? You can actually contact them and say, you know, is this correct and is that correct? And what should I do about this? And that's their whole job, is to help both companies, but also individuals. If you're an individual, you say, wait a minute, I keep getting these adverts for this, why does anyone think this? You know, you can get your credit reference details brought up, and then you can find somebody said something about you, like you didn't pay for a mobile contract. You know, I never took a mobile contract out with them.
You don't have any privacy anymore, do you? Once
You don't, but
No.
you can't have both. Everyone likes the benefits of social media and stuff, but yeah, you're quite right. Nobody likes the fact that you can't have
Depends
privacy.
how much you put on there though, isn't it? You can always keep what you
Yeah.
put out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, if you're sensible about it, you know, especially when you got kids, particularly when you get kids, you get probably a lecture from the school. Primary schools are good at this. As soon as kids go to school, they start giving, you know, don't put pictures of your kids on the internet. It's, you know, you're not allowed to take photographs of school assemblies and stuff anymore, because you're going to end up put them on, and there's all these kids going around, and other people on there. You may have kids who are basically being searched for by an outraged father or somebody whose mother's been abused by them, and you know, all this sort of things can happen. So yeah, you've got to be very careful, really. You've got to be very careful. Anyway, I won't get into too distracted by that. But there you go. Right, I won't play this video, but it's already on Google Dingo. It is quite good actually. It's a little bit outdated. Most people have heard about general data protection regulations, but it will explain. I don't think it tells you at the end what percentages, but it does make a huge difference. As I say, the Data Protection Act, big companies used to laugh at it. They say, oh yeah, £10, £1,000 fine, what's that to me? You know, Yeah, I'm talking about bad big companies particularly. You know, a lot of bad big companies like used to do stuff which was not really good. But now that this has come in, and by the way, it applies globally. If you want to sell a product to any country in Europe, which is part of the EC, you gotta comply with these laws. So companies in like Florida in America have to comply with the European General Data Protection Regulations, the same as if they have to apply with the the federal laws. That's what made the huge difference. Otherwise, just by not complying, even if you're not in that part of the world, you can still get fined. And of course, other parts of the world will enforce, court decisions. Like the Americans will enforce our court decisions. So if a British court decides Facebook owes £100 million, then they can go to the American courts and say, right, tell them to pay up. Right, nearly there. Right, copyright. Well, it's very difficult to prove copyright. You can get things, recorded by the patent office if it's an item, but you can't prove what's called prior art. You can't prove something which has already been, if a certain task has been done in a certain way, you can't copyright that task. You can't copyright a procedure which has been done by others, even if it's not been recorded by the copyright. If if it's been done in a certain way, you can't make a machine that does it that way and copyright and say it's yours. Yeah, some of the classic ones is Apple wanted at one point to record round corners. Yeah, they actually put global patents right around the world to patent round corners, so no one else but Apple could have round corners on boxes. Yeah, it's true. And every time they try this, every course in the world went, you can't do that, it's prior art. You are not the first people in the world to have round corners on your design boxes. So
That's
you
so
can't
weird.
patent prior art. If it's already been used in the past and it's a common way of doing things, you can't patent it. Okay?
If you register your name, but the logo you've actually used and it's been used before, right? You got it from Canva, for instance. You cannot really have all rights reserved anymore, right? Because of the logo. But what can you put instead?
I don't know the full details, to be honest. It's very complicated these days with the internet, because it's who owns it. If you say, well, I was the first one to do it, well, wait a minute, if somebody in the Brazilian rainforest did this.
So would you avoid writing all rights reserved for that reason?
Even if somebody blatantly stole your branding, your logo and what have you, you'd still have to take it to court. So it's gonna kind of be meaningless, I think, is the
Because
end.
you want to protect your name as well.
I know, and it's really annoying, because if you've got like a good name and somebody comes along and steals your name, the classic, and sometimes it goes too far. You end up with like M&S suing everyone which tries to put the initials M&S and
Is that why a lot of people end up having a business name which has
unique,
the surname,
like
your unique name?
Kahoot, Gazoo, and all sorts of that was very much a reason for But then some of them found out, oh no, somebody else used to call themselves. Like, Australia used to have a load of these sort of little companies out there, and then somebody takes their name, and they're like
It's very easy to get it
Ubuntu or
wrong,
whatever,
isn't it?
and it's like, in some parts of the world these names are sort of common, but you wouldn't think it's an awkward conversation, it really is. And at the end of the day, you can't really sort of take someone to court and say they've done it intentionally if they've just done it not knowing. If they did, somebody in the South of France creates a food store called M&S, and one of them's called M and one of them's initial begins with S. You can't really take to court and say you're stealing it off. No, just that's what M&S did in the first place. It's very difficult. It is very difficult. So. Unfortunately, it's one of those things you get very entangled in law. However, most people, if you go to them and say, your brand looks very similar, you've got the same name, you've got very similar colours to us, we've been going for 25 years, could you change your brands? Then most companies, we didn't know about it, I'm sorry, we'll change it. You could go to someone and say, can you change your brand name? We're going 53 years, we've always used the same colours. You need to change your brand, we'll see you in court, mate.
It's a similar argument with this Paul McCartney and songs and people painting in their own
Yeah,
songs
there's
and
only
all that going on now. Isn't
there's
there?
only so many chords in the world. It's very difficult. You know, how many variations of like the 12 most common chords? You know.
That's what I thought. You're going to get some similarity.
You
when
will.
Over the amount of years that we've been
You
doing
will,
music.
and that's where it is, because you've got to prove that they've actually intentionally done that.
Yeah.
Where,
Yeah.
some, like music, 3 people can write the same song over 100 years, and
Yeah.
they might not sound similar, or they might sound very similar. Yeah, it's very difficult. Anyway, there we go. Nearly finished now. Few bits. I'm not going to go through all this. Few bits just for you to sort of think about. More further information with links. Obviously, I've kept the links in there, so it's useful for you to have. Okay, a few. Well, I'm not gonna. Look, you know what? These sort of things. These are what's going to happen to the big boys. These are not going to really happen to you. But. Be wary of, there are like hacking consortiums out there who, remember the Anonymous many years ago, they had the white faces, and if somebody upset them, they could be hacked by Anonymous, and Anonymous wasn't one person, it could have been thousands of hackers all working together, and it's a case of you need to be careful, but I don't think a lot of this is ever going to affect you, but you might be aware of it. So there is a Syrian electronic army, which basically is the Syrian electronic army. And if you say something about Syria, you will get hacked by the Syrian electronic army.
Yeah.
So be very careful. If you're providing something where other people can put content onto your website, like Facebook does that, and if they put something on there which offends somebody, you could be the one hacked. It could be you're the one who ends up getting hacked. Not that I think that's going to happen to any of you, but you have to be careful with things like people put comments on things. So you might want to sort of keep an eye on what people comment, and then if people are commenting, they put links in. Check the links and see what's going on. They could be using your website as some sort of drop to put bad content to share. You've got to be careful of this. Again, it's not you're not liable, but at the end of the day, you don't want that being associated with your brand, your website, wherever it is. So just a little thing to think about. So particularly with online payments, that's my only one of concern. If you are taking money off people, really be very careful. Personally, I wouldn't do it. I'd just use some third-party service like Stripe. There's loads of companies that do it all for you. And literally what you do is, as part of the purchase process, you transfer, the basic information, the names of the products, the total cost, any VAT, any shipping. You send that as a special package to the company. It's all online, done instantaneously. The company then takes over for the payment. Like when you send somebody to PayPal or when you send someone to Visa. So they deal with the payment, and basically what happens is the token is returned back to you to say they've paid, and then that money will go in your bank account at some point in the future. And you're basically employing somebody. You might charge you, I don't know, a big amount. If they're buying something like £1,000, they might charge you £10 handling fee, which sounds a lot, but on £1,000, it's only 1%. It's only 1%. And likewise, if it's like lots of small things you're selling, you might be like 3-4 pence here, 3-4 pence charges here. There might be a minimum 10p or something charge, but you haven't got to worry about any of data protection then. You don't even, in many cases, don't even need to register with the appropriate authorities, because they're the ones dealing with the actual, they're the ones keeping the customers. So when the customer's details are being put onto the order, you probably
They're
wouldn't even.
responsible.
They're
Yeah.
going to be the ones saying what's your name and address, gives you postcode, and you don't get any of that. The only reason you might get any of that is you might get back a token which has the name and address to send the order to, and you make sure after a period of time agreed, you delete that information. If you've got a 6-year warranty on the TV, you need to keep that information for 6 years. But if you've got a 12 years time, then that's when you're in trouble. So stuff like that, stuff like cookies, I'm not worried about. Keeping passwords safe, it's all basic stuff like that, really. Don't use private Wi-Fi for updating your website. Don't go to the airport and sit there for 3 hours updating your website on public Wi-Fi, because somebody else could be monitoring what you're doing. Use, if you're doing it in your own building and you're using your own building's Wi-Fi, you're going to be safe.
That's what I always worry about, using Wi-Fi in other places.
Yeah, it's not always considered, you know, going to Costa or Costco, sorry, no, Costa, isn't it?
Costa.
Costa, and people sit there with their laptops and thinking, that is so unsafe, that really isn't safe. Although, you can get around it by using what's called a VPN, there are ways around this. It will slightly slow down your connection, but it will make your connection completely safe. You know, well, pretty well.
Watching, I don't understand.
A VPN is just a way, it encrypts everything going out.
Right.
And what you do when you use a VPN is it doesn't get sent to the people whose website you're going to, it gets sent to a third party encrypted. And they have a key to unencrypt it, and then they send your message to the website, which sends it back to them,
Say it's okay.
which then encrypts it and sends it to you. So your bit to and froing is completely encrypted.
And
So-
can you do that on both the website and on email as well?
Yeah, you can encrypt email. It makes it really difficult for people to send and receive email, but you can. You can. There's normally, like Outlook's got a built-in encryption if you want to use it. So when you go to Sends, there's an add-on for Outlook, for example, which will allow you. And when you go to Sends, if you ever go to Sends, a little down arrow. Well, when you go to Send, you can choose the down arrow for Send encrypted, and it just gives you an extra option. And what it does, it doesn't send it direct to the person. It sends it to Microsoft, who hold it, and then Microsoft send a message to the people who are receiving it saying, there's an email, come to this site to decrypt this, and presumably they've been sent it like a special key. So that's how it all works out. So, but it makes it a lot more complicated. For business purposes, you don't want to be doing that. You don't want to do that because it's making it, and customers don't like stuff like that. It just goes off, forget it. All I want to do is buy a pair of shoes. I'm not going to go
There's a
through
lot
all
of-
the.
There's a lot of nonsense. in
It's
it.
a lot of nonsense.
Oh,
But encrypting the sales, the taking payment is absolutely essential. That's why I'd suggest get a third party if it's going to be. If anyone is doing that, if no one's doing sales as such, then you completely, you're fine. Even donations can be done easily. I know people who create websites for charities. Well, just create a PayPal account, and when they want to make a donation, they can put money in the bucket sort of thing through PayPal. It's totally secure, totally easy, and you get a copy then of the person's email address, and you can reply back to them and say, thank you very much for your donation. That's all you get. You just get their name maybe and and that's the only information you get. You don't get their credit card numbers. You don't get where they live. You don't even know where they come from. So you have to try and find a way of getting that information, yourself. But that's just to keep it secure for them as well as for you.
There's a lot of things to do just to do something so simple.
Well, it is, but if you're just doing a simple
It is,
website
yeah.
for your family or something, you don't need any of this. But I need to make sure that, because there will be people in the room who are doing sort of a little bit more high level than that. And if in 5 or 6 years' time your company's like getting to the point where you need to start thinking about this, then yes, you need to. You can't come back to me and sue me and say, well, you never told me about the Data Protection Act and having to be registered with this and that and the other. So anyway, just do that. But just to give you an idea. But at the end of the day, if you're of such a size that you need to do this, then you're obviously successful, and therefore you're not going to be worried about it. A good one, by the way. Insecure operating systems. Very little online is done by Microsoft. Microsoft don't like this being said about them, but very few people use Microsoft Server. Nearly everyone uses a Linux server for their website. It's much faster and it's a lot more secure. Even Apple are quite well thought of compared to Windows, Microsoft. So there are like there's a Microsoft server for hosting websites online. And other than Microsoft themselves, very few people use this. Most people use the Linux.
Yeah,
And that's what Google does as well. Google's 100% Linux based. Linux is a different operating system.
But if you use Office 365, does it not
It's
automatically
fine.
use
No,
it?
it doesn't make the Office files themselves will come from Microsoft's servers, but that doesn't make the rest of your website insecure.
Right, okay.
It's fine. It's absolutely fine. But if you're doing payments, or you're doing hosting your websites, if you get to the point where you actually pay someone to host, they will give you the choice of either a Microsoft server or a Linux server, and nearly everyone goes for a Linux server, and they're normally cheaper as well. Linux servers, no license fee involved.
so am I using Microsoft? That's why when I said to my brother at the weekend, The Office 365 went out and he just went, oh, don't I use Linux at work?
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
No, Linux is fine. I'm a bit of a
Yeah.
Linux, user myself, but no, Microsoft's fine as well. Don't worry. For your level,
For our-
it's absolutely
yeah.
fine. Don't
Yeah.
worry about it. But I'm just saying because you might hear these sort of terms like Linux.
Yeah.
If you're looking at hosting, and hopefully nobody is, because you don't really need to pay for hosting at the moment. You're doing it with Google anyway. But if you ever in the future look at hosting, you get the option of Linux hosting, which is actually better, cheaper. Normally much quicker and much more secure and everything. It's like it's daft not to use Linux for your hosting. So it's just one of those things you find out as you go along. Wow, I'll leave all that. Too much otherwise. It's probably unlikely for most of you. It happened on the last course. There's actually a special file on every. Oh, go back. This HTA access or HT access. It's actually a way of sort of publicly sharing the very basic information about your website. However, very rarely, but occasionally, some hosts don't give you web forwarding. So what you can actually do is manually edit your HT access file, which is automatically generated by whoever hosts, and then put in there the location you want the actual information to be stored by. What I'm saying basically is, if you pay, I don't know, GoDaddy to host your domain, and GoDaddy don't play the ball and give you free web forwarding, you can still go into this HT access file and put a little line which says the website to find. If anyone comes to this, jccasering.co.uk, the website to find is actually found at sites.google. So you can override even bad hosting companies to get around that. Okay, I won't go into any more details. You don't need it, but just in case anyone does come with the problems, I'm not going to go into that. Stuff on there for you to look at if you get a chance.